Hi, I'm Lauren Lehman, Addis Vice President of Marketing and Membership, and I am delighted to welcome our current NextG Alliance academic members, as well as prospective members who may be considering joining the NextG Alliance to our webinar. Universities are an important, valued, and really unique participants in the NextG member ecosystem. And to that end, our overview presentation material is geared toward addressing how to best maximize your membership participation in the contribution-driven NextG Alliance working group. You should leave today's webinar with a firm understanding of how to successfully engage in this initiative. But before we start today's program, I have two housekeeping items. First, please be aware that we are recording this webinar. It will be available for future playback, and you will receive a copy of the recording as well as the slide deck via email in the next day or two. Second, as you listen to the presentations, we encourage you to submit questions via the online question tool that can be found on the navigation bar. Our speakers are happy to address questions at the conclusion of their presentations. And with that, I'd like to introduce our two expert speakers. From Addis, Mike Nawrocki is the NextG Alliance Managing Director, and Eric Berger, a full-time professor at Georgetown University, is the NextG Alliance Technology Program Office Director. So again, feel free to submit questions. I will be reviewing those during the presentations and queue those up at the end for our speakers. And with that, it is my pleasure to turn the floor over to my colleague, Mike Nawrocki, to provide a NextG Alliance overview. Mike?
Thank you, Lauren. So I'd like to begin the webinar by just restating the real goals of today's overview. So that is, how can academic institutions best engage in NextG Alliance? Why is it important for academic members to deliver the future 6G thought leadership to this undertaking? And how can you contribute? What will be, what will be the derived value now and into the future? So let's begin. Next. So you can see that the real genesis for the NextG Alliance in terms of driving the structure was a Path to 6G call to action that added as issued back in late 2020. And just a few important points. First, it's important to note that the NextG Alliance was launched as a private sector-led initiative. And so that was a model that was discussed during the formative stages of the Alliance with US government. And we really received strong support from government in support of that approach. But it's at the same time, the real value of developing a collective vision, a collective roadmap for 6G is to engage North American governments to promote and execute on the recommendations, the priorities, and the proposed actions of the NextG Alliance. And finally, I want to highlight the point that we have rapidly grown from about 16 original founding members late in 2020 to now where we are today, about 70 members, and continuing to grow and get inquiries. And these members are not only joining as members to the organization, but they're bringing significant resources to the table. We're now grown to over 600 subject matter experts, and these experts are meeting as part of working group meetings on a weekly, almost daily basis. Next. So looking at the founding and full members, we transitioned from founding to full membership at the beginning of 2021. You can see companies that build networks, that design and manufacture products, software, offer cloud solutions, develop test systems, and overall bring innovation to the market. And you can also see many companies that do not always typically collaborate in these types of activities. Next. The contributing members is really where academic institutions, research labs, institutions, and others that are perhaps more specialized companies, where they bring contributions, they bring thought leadership across the NextG Alliance working groups. And this is really the part of the alliances that has been growing most rapidly at the present time. Before leaving this slide, I also want to mention that the full members have just recently approved a government membership level where government representatives can contribute their requirements, their needs, their visions to all the working groups as well. Next. So if we just look at the foundational goals for a moment, there are many goals of the organization, but if we just kind of look at this at a high level, the first is really to bring NextG to a national agenda level. And to do this many years in advance, I think one of the takeaways from 5G is that there was strong focus on 5G as we move close to the deployment cycle. But the goal of the NextG Alliance is really to create that awareness, the visibility, development of priorities well in advance of the 60 timeframe. The second is really a recognition that there are many activities around the globe focused on 6G research, on 6G stimulus programs, and so on. But the model that the model that the NextG Alliance is addressing is really one that makes sense for the North American marketplace. So it's taking into account all the various market issues, government policies, everything that's basically driving this region of the globe. That includes technology, but can also include things like societal drivers, economic drivers. And finally, there's a strong goal towards 6G market leadership. This is really where all the work is really leading to. It's really taking areas of research and development and standard strategy and so on, and applying them to commercializing products and making the North American market a successful market, but also allowing companies in this region to sell into the global market overall. Next. Wanted to spend just a moment on coming down maybe one more layer, is looking at kind of the overall approach for the vision. And so the NextG Alliance, and specifically the roadmap group within the NextG Alliance, has taken this view where we are looking at these 3 layers of vision. The goal of the NextG Alliance is not to simply create a technology vision. So we have understanding the broad audience for this work and the broad contribution base for this work. We've looked at layers that basically encompass kind of the national imperatives, the big policy goals, the economic and societal drivers. This should really be at the front end of what we are doing. Then we look at the layer that basically addresses applications and markets. So many of these markets are falling outside the ICT space. We're looking at kind of the big application drivers that will really provide the foundational platform for innovation. And then of course, the technology development area. There are many technologies that will be contributing to 6G. Many of these will be outside kind of the traditional mainstream communications area. So this is also an important layer. Putting all these together basically is our view of an overall vision. Next. I displayed the membership before, so I just quickly want to just address these classes of membership. So there is full members who basically provide kind of the overall strategy. The criteria is shown. There are contributing members who include academic institutions as well as the research community. And this is the layer of the organization that's really kind of doing the hard work, participating in the working group meetings themselves, and providing a thought leadership. And then I just mentioned the government membership level as well. The one thing I would say about the overall criteria is that there really is a commitment to North American leadership and to this marketplace. So that is the kind of the governing goal to entry into the alliance. And in fact, there had been some companies, some institutions that have applied that did not meet this criteria, so that we continue to kind of really focus on this region and creating a successful marketplace. Next. As part of this overall mission, we wanted to just provide this kind of the structural view of how the NextG Alliance will interact with federal government stakeholders. So this is very much around creating of strategies and priorities, funding recommendations, government actions. But the real important part of this view is the continuum that you see at the bottom. And this is where we believe that this region, North America, can be successful as we move ahead. It's really tying this whole continuum of functions together, where we take outcomes of, for example, 6G research and development, and we move these across the continuum to create a really vibrant 6G marketplace. And this really kind of defines one of our basic principles of research realization. Next. So let me at this point turn this over to Eric, who will take us through a number of slides that pertain to academic participation.
Thank you, Mike. Yeah, and thank you all for participating today. And if you're reviewing the recording, for taking the time out to listen to what we're doing here and how to best participate. If you look here, we're looking for getting input from academia, industry, and as Mike said, the government as well. And the idea is to come up with the roadmap, kind of a compass for how to move forward. And the idea is to facilitate discussion on R&D and discussions about delivery and education and advocacy to Congress, the White House, the NSF, NTIA, and industry. And really, kind of the academic view here, participation, is that we really believe that academia can help push the 6G vision beyond an incremental improvement on 5G. Leveraging academic research and intellectual property is of strategic value to North America, and there's value to academia to ensure that their intellectual property, the inventions that we create here in North America, is incorporated into the next generation of standards. And of course, as we are sitting around the tables together on the left side, and as we are educating Congress and the White House and the funding agencies, it's really great to have all the participants at the same table. And so as academics, you're at the same table with industry and those government funding agencies. If we can go to the next slide, please. This is really, why we see academic participation as critical. How should we say, left to our own devices, we'd probably come out with incremental innovation. 6G will be 5G plus a little more, which is kind of a lot of what happened with 5G. Let's take 4G and multiply everything by 10. And so from an industrial perspective, they are looking for a fresh perspective on the realm of the possible. What can we do that's beyond an incremental improvement on 5G? I would offer that academia has a broad perspective on the future use of licensed, unlicensed, and shared spectrum. And the other thing is academic institutions have economists, social scientists, and other non-wireless technology-specific expertise that is rarely found in industry and that are essential to a more robust national 6G roadmap. So if we can go to the next slide. So I did want to spend a little time, and as an academic myself, to kind of talk about how things are possibly a little bit different than what we normally see in academic and in some other standards activities. The model is, yes, you will see, and for those of you who are already in, you get a lot of emails. We have our calls, which are our meetings right now, every other week for each work group, and a lot of discussion gets done. We talk about what's new, what research we've got. But at the end of the day, the work group takes in contributions and produces a work product. And you see what I have there in italic. Only contributions count. So the Next G Alliance is contribution driven. It is the official contributions that get incorporated into the Next G Alliance work products. Those contributions are written documents submitted to a shared work platform. That's the Addis workspace that you were introduced to when you were onboarded into the Next G Alliance. The discussions in our meetings and over email are valuable. There's no question. I'm not saying you should only be putting in documents and who needs the email discussions or the meeting discussions. But at the end of the day, it's only the contributions that get considered for incorporation. And those contributions can vary from your latest IEEE transactions paper all the way through to here's a paragraph I want changed. The key here is only members of the NextG Alliance are eligible to submit contributions. And in this case, the contributing member is the academic institution. And I would note that we do have an all that you can eat model. Once the institution joins the NextG Alliance, any professor, student, or researcher from the institution can participate in the work groups and submit contributions. And especially as we look towards the value to the roadmap of academic participation, is there's no restriction on discipline. Yes, we really value the spectrum researchers, the technology researchers, but we also value the sociologists and the economists and the applications people who come with, again, thinking about things that, as engineers, we often don't think about. And so we really do welcome a wide range of expertise. So with that, I'll hand it back to Mike to talk a bit about the organization of the NextG Alliance.
All right, thank you, Eric. So let me bring this down another level to talk about the organization within the organization. So all good organizations have good leadership, so we're very fortunate to have strong senior leaders that have been at the helm since the formation of the Alliance. So leading, you can see AT&T and Ericsson leading the Alliance at the overall full membership group level. And then we have at the steering group level, the goal is really to have balanced leadership across the industry ecosystems. You can see that we're led by a group of very qualified steering group leaders from network operators, infrastructure vendors, and the hyperscale companies. Next slide. So at an organizational level, we've used these terms. I just want to very quickly define them. So the full member group, basically, they're really focused on providing kind of the overall strategy and direction for NextG Alliance. The steering group is the group that really manages the implementation of the deliverables, manages the work groups, manages the overall work program. And of course, the working groups are where the contributions happen, where the deep discussions happen, where for the most part, the reports are developed and all the content is integrated together. So that's kind of a basic view of the organization. Next slide, please. So what does that look like in terms of technical working groups? Where these are the 6 working groups that were launched at the around the spring, beginning of the summer, to really help to drive let's say the year 1, year 2 deliverables. No doubt there will be additional working groups we'll develop over time, but these are the core working groups right now that are working toward our initial release of reports and white papers. Next slide, please. I wanted to give you a very quick sense of kind of what's happening inside the working group so you could make appropriate decisions in terms of engagement. So the National Roadmap group is really kind of a foundational anchor point for the organization. This is where all the inputs from the working groups, as they relate to the vision and roadmap, will be integrated together. So right now the goal is to produce an issue 1 of the National 6G Roadmap by the end of January. This group is working very hard to deliver and execute on that. So this is a great place to both see the integration of all the activities, as well as to make kind of direct contributions into the thought process around the vision and roadmap itself. Next slide, please. The technology working group has a very large task. As you can see, a very large work plan. This group is really looking across the whole technology landscape and all the things that will touch 6G end of decade timeframe. They have already identified over 50 areas technology areas that will require assessment. The goal is to really come up with a prioritized list of technology development areas where this region should invest, resources, funding, and other actions to help to drive the 6G marketplace for the future. Next slide. The applications work group is really approaching this from the standpoint of the application drivers. And so this is really a combination of looking at some of the detailed use cases, but really taking that up to another level where you begin to kind of see the applications coming together into application classes. And that becomes kind of a major driver to things like the technology landscape and things like the spectrum landscape. So the applications group is very much at the front end of what we're doing, and this is an area where we believe academia can be especially helpful. Next slide. Likewise, on kind of the driver side of the alliance is the societal and economic drivers group, and this group is looking at kind of the big societal changes and drivers. Again, we're focused on kind of an end of decade time frame, looking at the things that are happening at from an economic competitiveness perspective, looking at the big government policy areas. So again, this should be, in terms of developing a roadmap, this should be at the front end of the process. And this is actually a very good area as well for academics to join in terms of economists, in terms of those who are looking at some of the big societal changes. Next slide. The Spectrum Group, of course, has a kind of a very complex mission in front of it. In some respects, it has to kind of focus on some of the metrics and KPIs that are coming out of other groups. But at the same time, the Spectrum Group can take a look at things like spectrum management, policies, areas like spectrum sharing for the future. And really the goal of this group is to present a report or a plan that can position the marketplace many years in advance, understanding the time frame that's required in terms of spectrum outcomes. Next slide. The Green Tree Group was launched, one of the first groups that was launched back in the April timeframe, and this group is really focused on the big issues around sustainability. So these are issues that relate to energy efficiency, climate, all the factors that really touch or affect a sustainable outcome for this region. But one of the key points is we are not only looking at how sustainability impacts this ICT sector, but we're also looking at how 6G from a sustainability perspective can also influence other industries, other verticals, adjoining industries. What can 6G bring to the table that really can promote those types of solutions for the future? So again, this is a great engagement point in terms of driving that agenda. Next slide. So we want to finish up with just from more of a practical perspective, what does it mean to contribute? How's decision making take place within the Alliance? These are some basic questions we typically get during the onboarding process. So as a general rule, as Eric stated, contributions drive this work. And these contributions can be in the form of conceptual contributions, typically the kinds of things you would see in PowerPoint presentations. As the work moves along, it can also be contributions that relate to development reports. They're more text-oriented contributions to editor groups. But the bottom line of all this is that contributions of all types are accepted, promoted. It's really, the contributions are really key to moving this work ahead. So that is kind of the most common way for academic institutions, for that matter, for industry, for government to contribute to the work and drive the thought process. Next slide. So I'll just kind of finish up on process. So how are decisions made? So of course, we talked about how work is progressed. In terms of how decisions are made, the Next G Alliance, like many other industry activities, if we can draw some parallels to the standards development activities, consensus is really at the core of what we do. So consensus is really defined as really substantial agreement, and it's not a simple majority, but it's something that leadership can recognize as the work moves along throughout the process. Certainly, every attempt will be made to resolve any concerns or objections. But when leadership sees that there's substantial agreement, then there'll be a call for consensus. And that's the process that we follow. Has been very kind of successful and road tested, and that's how we would plan to progress in terms of the contributions and in terms of the development of the reports themselves. So hopefully that's given you a very good understanding of the overall structure, the drivers, how academia can engage, and then a more practical understanding of how progress is made. So if we jump to the next slide, at this point, I'd like to turn it back to Lauren for any questions or wrap up. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Eric, for helping all of us understand how academia really fits into the NextG member ecosystem. And I want to ask a couple questions here in our last couple of minutes. Mike, you gave us a great description of the 6 NextG working groups. And Eric, you talked about how multidisciplines from academia, including sociologists, economists, research, and technologists can participate in this work. But perhaps, Eric, it might be helpful if you talk about where we would expect universities to participate. In which working groups would you expect to see the most participation?
Absolutely. Thanks for asking. And for many of you in the audience right now that maybe were recruited by me or by Addis NextG Alliance, probably came from the spectrum and technology world. And I'm pleased to see, others that are now on this call that are coming more from the applications and societal and economics needs world. In other words, there's a pull through. We all have our community of wireless communications expertise, and we're now starting to reach out in our organizations towards, again, like in societal and economic needs, we are seeing more of the sociologists, like people who are studying how to use communication technologies to enable the elderly to be independent and stay at home longer before possibly needing institutionalization or moving into assisted living. Likewise, reaching out to our colleagues, possibly still electrical engineering, on the Green G work group for power efficient devices, new ways of using communication technology for optimizing power use, so reducing power consumption, kind of both sides. And then the thing that just seems to be the hotbed of universities is applications, all sorts of neat new applications that, and I'll be honest, students in the lab, it's not really much me, it's more the students come up with these ideas that they don't know can't be done, and so they go and do it. So that's kind of the, pardon the pun, spectrum of participation that we would see and expect from universities.
Great, thank you, Eric. And Mike, I wanted to ask you, the roadmap you mentioned is anticipated for publication in early 2022. So what role will the working groups have after the roadmap is published?
Okay, thank you, Lauren. So all the working groups will be contributing to the roadmap. So there's an integration point that has to take place before the end of this year at more of a high level. And so these would be things like, what are the big drivers? What are the big technology development areas we should be focused on? What are the big application classes? These will all be basically synchronized into a view of a vision and a roadmap to meet this very aggressive deliverable date. But beyond that, these working groups are doing very deep assessments into all these areas that will provide much more insight as we move ahead. I mean, this is certainly a moving landscape. And so all these groups will be issuing individual reports, individual white papers, beginning in the late this year and into the first half of next year, that will provide additional insight on top of the roadmap vision itself.
And if I may, the work is really, even though we talk about delivering the roadmap in January, that's the beginning of the journey. For example, one thing the NextG Alliance has done is we're making a submission to the ITUR, If you're familiar with the work on IMT 2020, which was 5G, there's a publication M 2083, which was the vision for IMT 2020. That was the framework and overall objectives for the future development of IMT for 2020 and beyond. And we're right now, ITUR is working on the IMT 2030 or 6G. And we put in our first submission to that document, but if things go as usual, that document's going to be published probably in 2023, because we put in a very high level of we would expect to have carbon neutrality in communications networks over a time period. We are going to be fleshing that out, and we're going to be fleshing that out with a lot of basically your input. So again, I would say it's not, oh, you mean you're going to be done in 3 months? Thank you very much, goodbye. No, we're really starting in 3 months and only accelerating from them. Thank you.
That's great. And let's end with a final question, which I think both Mike and Eric might want to comment on. Do we anticipate that the Next G Alliance will be advocating for growing the North American mobile communication workforce? I suspect this will be of much interest to many universities as students are looking to go out into the workforce. And I think the question is, will the Next G Alliance play a role in that at all?
Sure, I'll start. Or go ahead, Mike.
Well, I can also some initial thoughts, and I'll just point back to the discussion we had on kind of the life cycle and the continuum of activities that go from research to realization. One of the goals of trying to pull this all together versus having it done independently is we can really leverage the outcomes. What do we learn in terms of our initial research and initial development activities? What do we learn about important application areas, important technology development areas? That should really translate into things like academic programs, into training, into job skills that really align with the end of the decade. So this is what we see as one of the core goals of the Alliance, that we're able to kind of advance some of this initial thinking and kind of push it forward to more of a 2030 timeframe. And then what does that mean in terms of, job skills of the future and important opportunities? So I think I want to kind of express that as one of our really foundational points from the very beginning of conceptualizing the Alliance. Thank you.
And I can offer that, when I go to particularly Congress to talk about what's going on in, beyond 5G, no matter how much I go in to talk about technology, the conversation very quickly goes to workforce and workforce development. And again, this is where academic participation, real two-way street, in that, it's great to have people and to you to be able to advocate for the importance of education for workforce development, as well to be able to explain, what we're seeing, what are not just, what is industry and government interested in for us to come up with curricula, but what are the kinds of skills that we see are going to be needed in the future? And in a sense, what kind of government programs are and are not working, whether it's as simple as the generic Pell Grant all the way through to targeted programs like we see in the cyber realm and in the DoD realm for sort of like scholarships for service and sponsored research programs. So I think it's a great opportunity and another channel in. A number of you are from large institutions that even have offices near the Hill. This is another pathway to get that message in and across to Congress and the agencies.
Okay, well, I think that it's time to wrap on that note. And in summary, we can say that the Next G Alliance definitely has an ambitious agenda ahead, and that academia has an important role to play in the development of this North American leadership in 6G and beyond. I hope that you were able to take away some information on how academia can participate. I know that there will be more questions. I encourage you to take a look at our website and nextgalliance.org. There is a contact form. Please feel free to submit any questions you may have, and we are happy to discuss your individual interests and find the best place for you to participate. And with that, I'd like to thank Mike and Eric and wish everybody a good day. Thank you.